We're here today to announce the new partnership between the Pennsylvania Game Commission and the University of Pennsylvania's School of Veterinary Medicine, Penn Vet. And out of that partnership grows a new program, the Pennsylvania Wildlife Futures Program. So with us today, we have from the Game Commission, Matthew Schnoop, he's the director of our Bureau of Wildlife Management. Brian Burhans, executive director of the Game Commission. To my left is Julie Ellis. Julie is the senior research investigator for Penn Vet. And Lisa Murphy, who is the associate professor of toxicology and the resident director of the New Bolton Center, which is part of the Pennsylvania Animal Diagnostic Laboratory System. So today we'll highlight some of the parts of the program, explain how the partnership is going to work, and point out some of the other important benefits of the program that will provide for both wildlife and citizens. So, Brian, please.
Well, good morning and thank you for being here this morning. Nearly 125 years ago, as wildlife populations became depleted by unregulated harvest, Pennsylvania's General Assembly established the Pennsylvania Game Commission to conserve and protect the state's wildlife and wildlife habitat. Through scientifically based wildlife management, funded primarily by hunters and trappers, the agency continues to proudly carry out our mission today by working to ensure that Pennsylvanians will forever have wildlife to enjoy. Many successes have been celebrated through the years. Pennsylvania's state mammal, the white-tailed deer, returned in large numbers throughout the state. Our black bear population, that decades ago appeared vulnerable, has enjoyed a similar triumphant rebound. And the bald eagle, our national symbol of strength and freedom, has been removed from the endangered and threatened species list due to the dedicated work of those who care about conservation and the agents in this agency and elsewhere. At no time in history has wildlife disease posed more problems for wildlife and its conservation. White nose syndrome, which was detected in Pennsylvania in 2008, has killed 99% of cave-dwelling bats. Chronic wasting disease, which was detected in free-ranging Pennsylvania deer in 2012, represents an ecological disaster unfolding before our eyes. West Nile virus has left Pennsylvania's state bird, the ruffed grouse, with an uncertain future and impacts many other wild bird species as well. It is within these trying times that the Pennsylvania Game Commission carries out its mission of wildlife conservation. And much like troubled times for wildlife brought about a fledgling agency and eventual successes, worsening problems and with wildlife disease have now led to a partnership poised to meet these new challenges head on. I stand before you today to announce the Pennsylvania Wildlife Futures Program, a partnership between the Pennsylvania Game Commission and the University of Pennsylvania's School of Veterinary Medicine, also known as Penn Vet. This new science-based wildlife health program will increase disease surveillance, management, and research to better protect wildlife across the Commonwealth. There are many practical benefits hunters and all Pennsylvanians will see as a result of this new partnership. For example, hunters who have their deer tested for chronic wasting disease will see much faster turnaround for test results as a direct result of this partnership. About 7 to 10 days as opposed to weeks or sometimes months. And hunters will also be able to track their test results online. But there are broader benefits as well. The Pennsylvania Wildlife Futures Program establishes a sustainable infrastructure for collaboration and represents a paradigm shift in managing wildlife disease. This initiative directly supports the Pennsylvania Game Commission's mission to safeguard the Commonwealth's wildlife resources for current and future generations. Our research-oriented partnership with Penn Vet will be invaluable in helping us define wildlife diseases, their impacts, and how we can manage them. It will undoubtedly enhance our ability to coordinate disease responses across agencies, our hunting community, and the public. For the Pennsylvania Game Commission, the Pennsylvania Wildlife Futures Program represents a significant investment in wildlife's well-being and public service on wildlife disease issues. The program is being financed by the Pennsylvania Game Commission under a 5-year contract with Penn Vet. But in a world where wildlife disease presents increasing threats to wildlife, and wildlife diseases in some cases create wildlife health concerns, it's an investment to secure the future of our precious wildlife resources. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Julie Ellis.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for being here, everyone, today. Our quality of life and outdoor heritage and prosperity are tied to the health and sustainability of fish and wildlife populations in the state of Pennsylvania. The health of wild animals is increasingly recognized as a fundamental aspect of their conservation and management. In the past 20 years, Pennsylvania has dealt with introductions of several new infectious diseases and disease vectors that affect the well-being of wildlife. As Brian alluded to, white nose syndrome has caused the deaths of millions of bats since its discovery in a cave in New York in 2006. The little brown bat, once the most common bat species in the state of Pennsylvania, is now a species of greatest conservation need, its populations having declined by 99%. Chronic wasting disease continues to spread to new parts of Pennsylvania, infecting and killing deer and threatening hunting tradition. When sick wild animals are observed, they may be an early warning sign of an infectious disease or an environmental pollutant that can harm other animals or people. Take West Nile virus, for example. That virus was first detected in wild birds in New York. Since it spread to Pennsylvania in 2000, West Nile virus has contributed to significant declines in the ruffed grouse, Pennsylvania state bird. West Nile virus has also caused human cases nearly every year since its discovery. A multidisciplinary approach to wildlife disease surveillance and response that includes wildlife managers, scientists, and veterinarians is required in order to adequately address these challenging disease threats. The School of Veterinary Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania, Penn Vet, and the Game Commission are thrilled to announce the Pennsylvania Wildlife Futures Program, a new science-based wildlife health program that will increase disease surveillance, management, and innovative research aimed at protecting wildlife across Pennsylvania. As the state's only veterinary school, Penn Vet's faculty has extensive expertise in investigating diseases in veterinary and human medicine. The Pennsylvania Wildlife Futures Program will integrate statewide wildlife health activities into a single unified program to address wildlife health issues, prevent the introduction of disease, develop rapid disease response capacity. The program will dedicate 12 employees, one of whom will be based at the Pennsylvania Game Commission's Harrisburg office, to addressing wildlife diseases. That will not only allow for more thorough disease documentation and investigation, as well as management, it will also allow the agency biologists to spend less time dealing with disease issues and more time focusing on managing wildlife populations. Our overarching goals are to enhance our ability to coordinate disease surveillance and response across agencies, our hunting community, and the general public. Pennsylvania's natural resources are the foundation of its beauty and cultural heritage. The Pennsylvania Wildlife Futures Program is an investment in that heritage for future generations. Thank you.
We'd like to open it up to questions at this time. Questions? Hal will come around. He has a microphone.
This is for the Game Commission. It sounds like it's a 5-year commitment, and it's totally funded by the Game Commission. What numbers are we talking about as far as financial investment?
So this is a 5-year contract with them. although we'd like to see it go much farther. We'd like to see this be a long-term contract because as this program develops, their relevancy is based on their presence and their ability to have the right people in the right places, and that's really what this is all about. And so we've dedicated a $10 million contract for the first 5 years. It's $2 million a year, with the assumption that that will continue once we get the infrastructure put into place. And we've been able to do a lot of things, really, in the short term. That we've signed a contract with them in early May. But it's going to revolve around getting the right people here so that they can focus on the long-term vision of where this disease management can go, ways to get to surveillance in, and that all comes down to a solid a group of people working on that with the long-term vision. And so it's going to be important that we take this out as long as possible.
And just a quick follow-up question. Obviously, we want to talk about how this impacts the Pennsylvania 100. Will this make it easier or at least more streamlined on how they get their gear tested for CWD? It sounds like it's going to at least cut the process in half as far as 7 to 10 days is what I saw, as opposed to weeks, months, so on and so forth. It's just going to be a lot easier for the Pennsylvania 100 who is worried about getting something tested for CWD.
Sure. So we've had a two-pronged approach. Number one is getting the right content experts involved with this process, and we've funded some of the testing equipment that goes to the new Bolton Center lab so that we have a more unified approach of getting the samples and having their primary focus on our samples. And so in addition to that, within our own information the Bureau of Automated Technology, we've built some tools here within the agency so that hunters can get on, put in their CID number, and get their test results back, or find out where their test results is in the scheme of being finalized. And so just having Penn Vet focus on our samples and having the ability for hunters to check those samples, we anticipate a much quicker turnaround time. In addition to that, this program is primarily focused on the agency and the agency issues, as you've heard, having those 12 staff. But in addition to that, there's a lot of other states that are challenged with getting CWD samples back. I know that some of the other states have been sitting on for a while. And so we're hoping that as this expands and this program grows, that we can also build this into a much larger facilitating support for other states, as well as our communication and collaboration with those states, right? Because diseases and these issues, as we all know, they don't respect boundaries, they don't respect state boundaries. And so us working together to unify our data and be able to make these management decisions for Pennsylvania, but in also a regional perspective, is going to be an important part of that as well.
Final question, is this how much of this is a proactive approach? Because we see what's happening in states like Wisconsin and other states in the Midwest where CWD is kind of, I don't want to say getting out of hand, but it kind of is getting out of hand. How much of this is to make sure that Pennsylvania doesn't go by that, where the entire state is basically a quarantine zone at this point?
Right, yeah, and as I said, the whole point of this program is to get the right people at the right tables. And so we want this to be proactive and reactive, to be honest with you. We've learned some lessons with CWD, but we need some support, and we need some program guidance, and we need some content experts to help us develop those programs and really move us in the right direction. But also, what's the next big thing, right? We don't know what that is, and we want to build something that will enable us to handle anything that comes our way disease-related in a much more sustainable and reliable way, and that's the vision of this program, is to use Penn Vet's resources so that they can help us through that process in the future.
I think it's important to note that this whole program, really, Dr. Schnoop's vision was to develop an actual program that is sustainable and we can build upon. This is an idea that he actually developed over a year ago, and we've been, as an agency, mapping out how to put this program together so we can get ahead of those diseases. And I think that's really important for us to be in a position where we can be more proactive. I mean, let's face it, we're global. New diseases are going to come. We'd rather be at the front end of these diseases rather than dealing with the consequences as they build. Chronic wasting disease is a good example. If we had this program in place in 2012, would we be in a better position today? I don't know, because you're right, Wisconsin is a disaster. It's a bad place to be. As an agency, we, for example, in chronic wasting disease, we've been tapping into experts all over the country, helping us define how we're going to respond to CWD, how we're going to manage for CWD. This program develops an actual program to help us better address these issues quicker because of the laser focus that can be placed on these diseases. Dealing with wildlife disease, when you look at our agency, most of our, there's many biologists out there that are trained. Our biologists were primarily trained for population management. We do a lot of research, but the research is oriented towards population management. This opens up a completely new door for opportunity for us to deal with wildlife disease in a much more effective way as an agency. There's no simple solution to any disease out there. Look at human diseases where we spend millions and millions of dollars and still don't have any cures. So this isn't a program that's going to cure all wildlife disease, but it is a program that should substantially help us better manage wildlife disease in a more proactive way.
One thing to add to that too, and for Lisa and Julie's vision of this as well, is they've been adamant about including public relations. As you can imagine, EHD, white nose, a lot of those things, the management, CWD comes back to the hunters, the public, and having their support and promoting these programs, and we need that. We need them to participate in that. And so they've been adamant about making sure that we have not just the content experts for biology, for the disease ecology and so on, which are essential, but also having folks that are going to tell the message and that are going to deliver the message and receive the input from the general public on how we can manage this, which is a huge portion of this as well.
In terms of surveillance, is this going to involve new people in the field collecting data, or is this more a case of taking all the data that you have and kind of bringing it into one central location to analyze?
I think it's a couple things. I think one is about continuing to evaluate the surveillance. Are you getting enough samples? Are you looking in the right places? And it also, so that continual review of how the procedures that we follow. We have field staff in place. We have had to ramp up a little bit for CWD, obviously, for a lot of the testing we do there. So, a lot of the personnel increases, if they are needed, would only be determined as we, look through these programs and recommendations come back from Penn Vet as far as how we can better and more effectively conduct, for example, surveillance. But we do have, staffing in place that can do that. It's just, we don't know what the next bug's going to be that comes down the road and what that might involve.
The other thing you mentioned a lot of was response. Is this a case that you're looking for, you're hoping to find a cure for, CWD or something, or is this a case, okay, the next time we have to go out to the public like you did in the South Central part of the state and ran into all that opposition, and now you have more weight of science behind what you propose to do?
Well, I think it's more along the lines of what's the best we can do with the best available information that we have, and then looking at what are the gaps in knowledge that could be evaluated. So those gaps in knowledge are areas where potentially this partnership can try to fill in those gaps so we can learn more about whatever disease we're trying to manage at that time. Chronic wasting disease is a good example. I'm very doubtful that we're going to come up with a cure for chronic wasting disease. Our efforts and focus probably will be is how can we better manage for chronic wasting disease. The science continues to evolve. What we knew about CWD in 2012 and 2000 is much different than today. There's more research that's been done. There's states that have dealt with this disease over a long term. We've been able to learn from the challenges that they face. And so we can address with this partnership a lot of those issues with chronic wasting disease or West Nile, or, a good example is white nose syndrome in bats. Our bat biologist has done some really cutting edge research to look at how to address white nose syndrome. And this partnership can help fill those gaps of knowledge that we may need to more effectively deal with that disease.
Last question, you've been spending about $1 million or so, I believe, more in the past on wasting disease a year. Is that in addition to this, or is this rolled into that?
Now, that's in addition to this.
Let me jump back to your original question too about the field staff. So one of the things that we've been talking about and have reached out to a small group of my staff is that this really is going to come down to getting enough samples, ensuring that we have enough samples for the general public. Go beyond CWD and go into roadkill samples or human involvement samples and things like that. That's going to be important that we build an infrastructure and put people in place that can receive those samples and get them to where they need to be, and that we can also, the second part of that, which is database management. We have to build a database that we can put the data in, which we've already done as an agency, really one of the only agencies in the nation, that have this wildlife health program. And so that's a big deal, because then we have somewhere to put the data, and then the other challenge is building the interface so that the public can receive the data back, or that staff can receive the data back in a useful way. And so we're working on that as well, and so making sure that when people submit their samples, that it's a timely manner to come back and tell them what the result was, or maybe they want to see their sample in relation to other samples. If you think EHD, you know, is this one deer an isolated incident, or is there a bunch of them around? So those kind of things are useful information that the agency can use to make management decisions, but then in addition to that, determine, is this a bigger problem, right? And be able to focus on that. And again, that comes back to samples and the ability to manage that data and get it back out in a usable, analytical way.
Are there any other states that have similar programs that this was modeled after, or is this kind of the first of its kind?
Actually, we spent a lot of time at Cornell. Actually, we got back from a trip about 2 weeks ago, where Cornell and DEC have set up this collaborative relationship, and it's really kind of been a solid foundation for us to build on. We've spent a lot of time with Beth Bunting and Kristen Schuler at their program, who are similar co-directors as Lisa and Julie. And so they told us a lot of rabbit holes to avoid, and a lot of things that are important. And I would say this is a bigger initiative, right? It's a bigger initiative off the bat than what Cornell has done, and we're trying to solve some bigger problems like that database. We want to do that in-house. We have a phenomenal Bureau of Automated Technology that's able to build those tools, and I think eventually really be useful to a lot of other states who just don't have those capabilities.
Before we get too far away from the funding on this, and I think it's a great program, very forward-looking, and hopefully it's going to give us some answers to some very tough problems. But we're managing all the wildlife in Pennsylvania, and hunters foot the bill for all that. For bald eagles, we never going to hunt, never want to hunt. Why are we getting some money from the rest of the Commonwealth? Because it's right to state constitution. We're supposed to take care of the resources, and we're blessed with a lot of good resources in the state. But once again, the hunters get holding the bag for the whole thing. I mean, in this in particular, the bats. That's the biggest ecological disaster I can think of in my lifetime, and that has nothing to do with hunting. And why are we sticking to this obsolete model of the hunters pay for all the conservation in Pennsylvania, and even just some matching funds. Let the state treasury kick in another $10 million. Let's really take this.
Well, you bring up some very good points, and I'm sure moving forward there will be more opportunities for that. From an agency standpoint, we knew it was our responsibility as the agency that manages for all wildlife in Pennsylvania to take that leadership role and establish the program. So we'll be looking in the future to other additional opportunities that continue to fund and ramp up this program. I think, the sky's the limit in the amount of research that could be done. There's just a lot we don't know about diseases. But your point's well taken, and we'll be looking in the future to see other partners that will come into this to help fund this moving forward.
Well, that's encouraging. And for the veterinary side here, most of us, and myself included, when you think of veterinary, you think of domestic animals, pets, and livestock, and things like that. How much do you folks get involved at the present time with wildlife? Is managing West Nile virus in ruffed grouse the same as a similar virus in, say, a flock of chickens or something like that? And obviously, CWD is a TSE related to mad cow disease, so I'm sure you're on top of that. And is there any progress made with that maybe could help us on the deer side?
Those are great questions, actually. I'm going to let you, so I'm an ecologist. I have a PhD in ecology. And Lisa is actually a veterinarian, Dr. Murphy. She runs the diagnostic lab at New Bolton Center. So I think we can both speak to this, but I'm going to let you go first as the veterinarian.
All right, I would love to answer your question. It's actually a great one that you bring up. And so in terms of veterinary medicine, it is actually really, really broad. What's kind of exciting about it It's very broad in terms of animal health problems, whether it's infectious disease, whether it may be contaminants in the environment. And some of those, like you brought up, may affect domestic animals, wild animals. Some of them affect people as well. So that's actually something really exciting and important to look at. And also, too, there are a lot of interactions between agriculture and wildlife and people and their domestic animals and the environment as well. So, it's actually, it would be wrong if you're trying to take sort of a one health and holistic approach to wildlife health, animal health, human health, and ignore the wildlife component. So, in what we do already in veterinary medicine and at our diagnostic labs at the Bolton Center and at the bigger Penn Vet, is wildlife is often a really key part. Sometimes it's a focus, sometimes it's not, but it's always there. And so this is actually for us a really exciting opportunity to make sure that we're looking at all of those things to come up with innovative, best approaches to a wide variety of problems and challenges.
There are also, so I run a regional wildlife health program as well that will work synergistically with this one. And what I've learned over time about veterinarians is that there are some that have specialized training in wildlife. That's actually a growing field of training, in fact, because of all of these disease issues in the wildlife. So we're looking, as part of this program, to hire veterinarians that have that expertise in wildlife. A wildlife veterinarian, a wildlife pathologist, that they actually exist. So that's somebody, a pathologist is somebody who looks at dead animals and tries to figure out why they died. There are people with expertise in veterinary diagnostics specifically to wildlife. So we will have that as part of the program.
Yeah, oftentimes, when you look, especially with agriculture gets a large line share of the attention. Obviously, it's such a big industry. Wildlife is kind of, it's there. And what this program really does is puts wildlife first. Wildlife is always the focus, and always is focus for this program to deal with. So wildlife isn't second class, it's first class in this program to be dealt with, which is why I'm so excited about this program and the vision in the future for it as well.
And talking about agriculture, and what about the deer and elk propagators? Because that's the vector for CWD in Pennsylvania. That's where they all came from. All 4 DMAs, they're all started with captive animals there. Are you guys going to be on them too?
I know.
And why are we why aren't we shutting them down, basically?
Well, those are under the authority of the Pennsylvania
Department, I know, and they took it away. You guys had a little bit of pull here one time, did you not?
We had authority over it.
Yeah, and then they said no, and look what happened.
Yeah, Act 51 changed that.
But I think you have to take a hard look at it. That's where it's coming from. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's where it originally started in the 60s in Colorado. So, I mean,
I think as part of this program, one of the goals is to work closely with some of those other agencies. In fact, we're even planning an interagency meeting on CWD to talk about how to address some of those issues.
well, and until there's a live test, or a test for live animals, I mean, I don't see how you regulate or control that in the capital birds. I mean, it's a daunting, it's scary.
Yeah, daunting's one word I think.
Yeah.
No, I know, I would wish, this is when I originally wrote about this before it even came east to Mississippi, I said, this sounds like the worst science fiction movie I've ever heard of. It's always fatal, there's no cure, there's no way to test for live animals, it's just beyond daunting, I think.
It's another benefit of this partnership too, because we don't tell University of Pennsylvania what to say. They're the researchers and they develop their own messaging. There are some hunters that don't want to believe the Game Commission because sometimes we don't have very good news to share. All we can do is share the facts. And I think one of the benefits of this partnership is, ask another resource, there you go, and a credible resource at that, and that's what's important because there's so much misinformation about CWD floating around there. That again is almost as daunting as the first issue.
Well, I'm talking about, I live 20 miles from Ground Zero, northern Bedford, southern Ware County, where all the hoopla was about the target removal. While I was sitting here this morning waiting for this, I got a text from a very dear friend, avid hunter, smart guy, 2 master's degrees in business stuff, telling me, nobody's ever thought of CWD, who cares about it, it's a big deal. It's like, so I know it's like even it's beating your head against the wall sometimes. I hear so much misinformation too. So again, I appreciate all the insight and help, and hopefully we can make some progress on this.
Anybody else? Out down front.
I represent publications in Juniata, Mifflin, Snyder, Northumberland County region. And you had said this is something you've been working on for over a year now that's being processed. So what has happened there in Greenwood Township, Juniata County in June, with that case, that's very close to where I live. Have you been able to start anything around that time to work with that situation? Have you been able to do any testing as a result of that particular situation in Greenwood Township? It was a big deal in my area when that happened. So I'm just wondering how this has impacted that or affected that particular situation for my readers.
Sure. So one of the major focuses of the CWD response in this state is hunter involvement, making sure that they're part of this. And so we've started that process. We also anticipate being able to roll out our response plan in the September timeframe for a year or 12 months worth of public input into that. It's going to be important to have our stakeholders and have the public have input into how we respond. We've still maintained the status quo. We still are trying to engage landowners, especially in these flyer spark areas, because the spark areas allow new novel cases that people are still supportive of aggressive response. And so that's happened, and that will continue to happen. That's an important part of this, because as we know from other states, if you can get to it early, you can still manage it. And that's an important fact that we haven't lost sight of. Now, what this actual relationship here today that we're discussing will do, this Wildlife Futures program, is making sure that those hunters now, these DMAs are getting big. We're well aware of that. But allowing those hunters to submit samples and give quick response is going to be essential for transparency and for their decisions and their ability to make decisions of what they're going to do. And that's going to be very helpful. Making sure that we have the right content experts contributing to this response plan over the next 12 months as we develop this thing and further refine it is going to be an essential part of that. And making sure that we get the message out there to get the public involvement into areas that are negatively affected, unfortunately, but also not negatively affected. That's also important to take the rest of the state into consideration. And so all of those things have been and will continue to play a role in our CWD response.
And then just to add to that, the fact that we're going to spend the next 12 months listening to hunters, talking to hunters, educating people, there's a specific reason for that. Because one thing we've learned through other states that are dealing with CWD is that if you don't engage the public, you virtually seems to have no chance of being successful in the long term. Like as mentioned, it was pointed out earlier, there's so much misinformation. Your first reaction is, here's an issue, we know what we can do, let's get in there and do it. But we know that for the long-term benefit of dealing and managing with CWD, we've got to make sure we really do a good job of engaging our hunters. Our hunters are our friends. They are part of the solution to helping us manage this disease, and we want to engage them in the long term to getting that support. CWD is probably one of the most, in my experience in 10 years in this profession, probably the most difficult thing I've ever seen facing any agency. I've seen there's other state agencies where it went political, and they actually gutted the agency for political gain, and well as Wisconsin. It's a very ugly disease. There's many in the hunting industry that won't even talk about CWD because of the backlash that they get from folks who really don't want to believe in CWD. So it's for me, in my opinion, one of the most challenging things I've ever faced as a professional in trying to work our way through this issue.
And one more thing to add to that, of the vision of the agency and the vision of Penn Vet, it's very different, in my opinion, than everything else I've ever seen, because everything else I've ever seen in a research program and a public entity has always been project-based. This is not project-based. These folks are here from the beginning, middle, and end of this process, right? That's important, because they're not just going to roll out research and say good luck. They're going to be part of the messaging of that research. They're going to be part of the conversation where we say that doesn't work and here's why, what do we do now? Having them part of it and having them present will make it really relevant in their role and how we manage all of this. And I think that's an important distinction between what we're doing and what has been tried in the past, and why I think this will be successful.
So at the end of the 5 year, what goal do you want to reach by the end of the 5 years, and what are the possibilities that's going to continue after that? I know it's early and premature
Sure.
to see that far into the future, but where do you want to be 5 years from now, and then where could you possibly go from there?
Sure. So one of the recommendations we got at Cornell was don't expect too much off of that. And we've already flown in the face of that already with the work that Lisa's done in her lab to get the CWD test result, or testing facility up and running, right? That's already happened, and it's only been one thing in the contract or two. That was a big achievement for us, and that's a big achievement. And we have a lot of benchmarks moving forward so that we can show the relevancy of this program. So in year 5, it's a no-brainer to continue the contract. And so those benchmarks, we have, I believe, a press packet here, that those benchmarks will be in it, that you can review those, of which are the database management, the ability for us to manage the data that we're collecting, the analytics of that data, getting it out into usable form to the public, getting the samples submitted. That's a big process in and of itself, just getting the samples across the state, outside of CWD, right? We have that down pretty pat. But at this point, we're also talking about much larger sample sizes, right? We want much larger sample sizes of all the species that we collect, making sure that we build the infrastructure to get those, have the database to put those into, provide the analytics that the hunters and the non-hunters can use, and then ultimately have the content experts into our program development and to help us have input into how we manage for CWD, or how we put information out about EHD, or whatever that is. And then having that kind of communications is a huge benchmark for us, working with our information education department, their PR department, making sure that we're getting the information out to the folks that need it, and the folks that don't even think they need it, but they do. Having all those benchmarks are going to be are really important for these first couple of years, and that's where our focus is going to be. But primarily our focus right now is to make sure we get the right people that we need on staff so that they can help Penn Vet get up and running.
Any other questions?
One more comment. Just one more comment I just want to say, because there's so many people behind making things like this happen. Too often, one big group in our agency gets missed, and that's our board of commissioners. And I just wanted to publicly thank them for their leadership, their vision, and for their commitment. This is a big program for us. This is one of our biggest programs that we have. And they saw the vision, and they showed, I thought, some very great leadership in allowing us to get this done. So I did want to recognize those folks for what they did, because without them, we wouldn't have this.
Thanks, Brian. Anybody else? That will conclude next agenda.